What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. So the Packers official 16-man practice squad was just released, along with two other players they released today. So first and foremost, earlier today, the Packers signed two players. Zane Anderson, a safety, most recently with the Bills, and tight end Ben Sims, most recently with the Vikings. Both of those moves needed a corresponding move, and those two moves were releasing inside linebacker Tariq Carpenter and defensive lineman John Ford. Two players I had off my initial 53-man roster prediction. They were on it for a solid one day, and were two players I expected to be the corresponding moves for the Sims and Anderson signings. Anderson seems like an upgrade to Tariq Carpenter as a core special teamer, and the Packers had a pretty big need at tight end and not a huge need for a sixth defensive lineman that didn't have a good training camp. If you want to go learn a little bit more about the two new signings, I did just release a video. You can click the link right above. Now going over their 16 total practice squad players, the Packers just released this on their own website. So first it says they released Carpenter and John Ford and signed the following players to the practice squad: tight end Austin Allen, cornerback Corey Ballantyne, edge Keyshawn Banks, wide receiver Grant DeBose, center James Empey, safety Innis Gaines, quarterback Alex Magoo, wide receiver Bo Melton, linebacker Aaron Mosby, linebacker Kenneth Odumegwu, fullback Henry Pearson, safety Benny Sapp, defensive lineman Chris Slayton, running back Patrick Taylor, tackle Kadeem Telfort, and cornerback Keandre Thomas. So this is actually pretty close to the practice squad roster I had predicted for the Packers. I thought they'd end up signing Austin Allen to the active roster, but I did say there was a chance they could go and sign a street free agent, which they did in Ben Sims. So Austin Allen is now back on the practice squad, which I think is a good idea. Cornerback Corey Ballantyne, I think, is also a nice add to this practice squad. I thought he did decently well in training camp. Not enough to make the 53-man roster, but he's a special teamer. He can get called up to play some corner and special teams if they really need him to. Keyshawn Banks, I thought, was a player that was kind of lost in that edge room in terms of how much other talent they have. Keeping 6 edge guys on this roster, Keyshawn Banks really got lost in that group, although he played really well in the preseason and training camp. And he was actually one of the best run defenders on that defense this whole preseason. He finished the preseason with an 81.3 PFF grade, including 2 pressures. Keeping 2 wide receivers on the practice squad is a good move for the Green Bay Packers. I thought they'd bring back Bo Melton to the practice squad, and that's exactly what they did. Now, I did think Grant DeBose was going to make the 53-man roster. That didn't happen yesterday, so at least he didn't get claimed through waivers. It's something around like 2% of players that get waived on the 53-man roster cutdown day actually gets claimed by another team the next day. So a lot of the time, these fringe roster players are not going to get claimed by another team. It's very, very rare. So Grant DeBose passed through waivers. He was a 7th-round draft pick out of Charlotte, had a decent training camp, in my opinion, was hurt for the first portion of it with a back injury and was on the NFI. But once he came back, it seemed like he jumped right into action. He had 3 receptions for 35 yards in the 2 preseason games, but simply just got outplayed by Malik Heath, and Malik Heath definitely deserved to be on the roster over him. Bo Melton was hurt most of training camp. I think he only played in 1 game and had 1 reception for 3 yards. After that first portion of training camp, he was actually my 6th wide receiver due to what he can offer on special teams. He's a speedy type of wide receiver, so I'm happy he's back on the practice squad. Getting 2 linemen on the practice squad in James Empey and Kadeem Telfort give them a little bit of versatility there. Empey being an interior guy, a center, and Telfort that another long arm type of tackle they love to keep on their practice squad, just like they did in Josh Nijman and Caleb Jones last year. Empey did pretty well in the preseason, didn't allow a single sack or a single pressure, and even had a 83.3 pass blocking grade. The Packers keeping both Benny Sapp and Innis Gaines, I think, is a good move. They're both guys that I had making the practice squad. Benny Sapp, I thought, had a really nice training camp, and if the Packers didn't draft someone like Anthony Johnson Jr. in the 7th round, he likely would be making the roster right now. He had an 82.0 PFF grade with an 83.3 run defense, an 82.2 tackle grade, and a 71.2 coverage grade. He was actually top 3 for all defenders in preseason for the Packers in grades. He did really well in coverage, only allowing 1 reception for 7 yards, had an interception and a pass breakup, and only allowed a quarterback rating of 18.8. And then Innis Gaines, although didn't have a great preseason on defense, offers you a little bit of versatility in the fact that he can play slot cornerback, he can play safety, and he's also a special teamer. So if they need to call him up for special teams reasons during the season, he can definitely do that. They also kept quarterback Alex Magoo, which just makes sense as a 3rd quarterback being on the practice squad. He was pretty much the 3rd quarterback all of preseason. Fullback Henry Pearson is an interesting one. I wasn't exactly sure if the Packers are going to bring him back on the practice squad, but it does make sense in case Josiah DeGuara goes down that they can elevate Pearson to play that same exact role like he did this offseason. The second cornerback they kept on the practice squad is Keandre Thomas, who I thought had a pretty solid preseason, a 71.3 overall grade with a nice 77.9 tackle grade and 70.8 coverage grade. Only allowed 2 receptions on 7 targets for 23 yards and a 40.8 passer rating. And the final 2 players, Chris Slayton and Patrick Taylor. Chris Slayton added to the practice squad makes sense. He's been here for a couple years, knows the system, can get called up for the defensive line if they need more bodies down there. And Patrick Taylor has been a part of the Green Bay Packers for a while now and could very well get called up for special teams reasons, as he was one of the main special teamers last year. And it was kind of a shock to not see him make the roster over Emmanuel Wilson. But like I said, I'm hyped for Emmanuel Wilson making the roster, and I figured Patrick Taylor would just go right back to the practice squad, as we see here. One surprise here is there's not any outside players added to this practice squad. I thought maybe 14 or 15 would be players that were in the Packers training camp, and 1 or 2 would be from an outside team that wasn't claimed through waivers, but that's not the case. All 16 players spent time with the Packers in this 2023 training camp. But that about does it for the video. Just wanted to update you guys on the Packers' new 2023 practice squad, as well as the 2 cuts they made in correspondence to the 2 new signings. If you are a new viewer here and want more Packers news, analysis, and updates, make sure to go down and click that subscribe button to stay in the loop with everything Green Bay Packers this season. But that about does it for this one. I'll catch you on the next one, and as always, go Pack Go.